Well, welcome to the webinar, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. I'd like to start the webinar with an acknowledgement to country. I begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people, traditional custodians of the land on which I am working today, and pay my respects to their elders past, present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples here today. Now, everyone, as you can see on your screen, we've got two items there. We've got a chat bar and we've also got a Q&A. So I would invite you during the webinar to certainly engage in questions. This is our second of these type of sessions. We've run some in person and we had a lot of questions, and it was really great for everyone to be able to get into that and share ideas. I'd also like to, we're going to be sending out the webinar to everyone, a link to it, so there's no need to take notes, but I'd like to introduce my co-conspirators here. So, I think we're all a bit younger with the exception of you, Ian, looking at this.
Maybe you're too kind.
But anyway, I've got Keith Muirhead, who is General Manager, Talent Acquisition at Fonterra, and Keith and I have co-worked and shared a number of different roles over, shall I say it, 20 years. And I've also got Ian McCreary, who is the strategic solutions at APAC Paradox. But prior to that, Ian was 7 years TA in Optus. So he's got quite a lot of experience in that. Our topic today is really all about recruitment automation. We all know what the economy's doing. We're reading things that, some organisations are shedding staff. So it's never been more important to be able to be productive, to reduce administrivia, and to allow people to be able to focus on value add. And that's what a lot of our conversation is going to be today. But there's also another theme to this, which I think is even more important. And, guys, correct me if you think I'm wrong. But this is about the people experience. It's about offering a service to candidates that they didn't previously have, that they have in other areas of their life, like Amazon, where they can order things 24 hours a day. And you'll see here, and Keith will make plenty of notes about this, how we've changed candidates, how candidates work with Fonterra and things like that. So before we go into a lot of this, I'd love to, the webinar chat, I think, is open. Could you just pop in there? Where are you calling in from? Well, not calling in from, I'm a DJ, aren't I, all of a sudden? Where are you currently at? We'd love to sort of see some notes there from you. I'd love to get some interactions. Brisbane, Sydney, Fiona, thank you. Avalon Beach, that sounds rather exotic. Wellington, windy Wellington. Yeah, Penang, Alajan, oh wow. India, what an eclectic bunch. Do we have any from, we've got Auckland too. Keith, do you know everyone in Auckland?
Mostly, yeah. I did see a couple of names pop up.
Wonderful. Thank you everyone for helping us with that. Liz Duncan, hey Liz, hope you're going well. Gee, it's great to see everyone there. All right, well look, Ian, I'd like to hand over to you now, just to sort of contextualise what is Paradox. Over to you, mate.
Great, thank you, Trevor, and hi everyone. Really looking forward to today's session. And look, just to sort of echo Trevor, we're really keen to make this interactive and be guided by sort of everyone sort of joining the webinar. So please jump in, ask questions, be contentious and throw them out there, and we'd love to sort of discuss them today. But yeah, to Trevor's point, I really want to spend just a couple of moments sort of talking about Paradox, sharing our why, and our experience. I'm really conscious that, whilst we work with some of the largest and sort of most innovative, organizations globally, we're a reasonably new entrant in the market here in Australia. So just wanted to help give you an overview of us to help set the context for today's session. So, I think in terms of, Paradox, we see the world differently. We work with organizations, day in day out, and we're hearing sort of, a few themes and trends coming through. And one of those is really around experience that Trevor spoke to. And the other one is around efficiency. So with sort of, you know, the uncertainty today, you know, it's really around, you know, getting asked around how can we do more with less? And we'll sort of dive into that in greater detail today. But I also wanted to speak for a few minutes around experience and dive into that. Because, you know, people today are really conditioned to, you know, do more things on their phones, and they've sort of grown accustomed to, you know, that consumer experience that's fast and frictionless, you know, whether that's buying things online like Amazon or through Instagram, or, you know, ordering your dinner through Uber Eats. You can transact kind of anywhere, anytime on a mobile device. And the expectation, not of just candidates, but also sort of hiring managers, and I'd argue sort of, you know, being a recruiter, that expectation transcends into, you know, the hiring and recruitment process as well, and getting that kind of instant gratification. However, you know, much of the recruitment landscape today still doesn't look like this. So if we jump to sort of the next slide, you can see sort of the experience of many ATS today. You know, candidates get greeted with this, going to your career site, applying for a role, you know, for the first time, having to create a username and password. And it's, to be honest, sort of non-thinking and friction UI, you know, friction built into this UI, where we see about 60+% of candidates dropping out of the application process. And, you know, personally, in a competitive candidate market like we are today, you know, can you afford it? So, you know, I'd love to see in the chat, you know, if you apply for a role in your organization, you know, do you have an experience like this today for your candidates applying for your roles?
Ian, question, and in terms of, is there any research in terms of EVPs about organisations that offer that, you know, amazing candidate service versus organisations that have more of a traditional approach? Have you read or seen anything on that?
Yeah, so Paradox did some research and aggregated some data across, you know, our clients, and that's sort of over sort of 700 globally. And they saw over a 60% uplift in applications when they switched off this step alone. So moving to a kind of a conversation first, frictionless experience, they saw a huge uplift in their applications.
When you use the word frictionless, could you just elaborate on that a tiny bit? I don't quite understand what that is.
Yeah. I suppose it's around making experiences simple and fast and easy. And I suppose, Trevor, we had a conversation a little while ago around, you know, you purchasing something online with Amazon, you know, and you did that at 11 o'clock at night. You quickly went online, you jumped on your mobile phone, you purchased what you were going to purchase, which I don't recall what it was.
A shaver. My wife was really shitty. It was a $700 shaver. I've been looking at it for a while, and the other one went bang, and I thought, I'll buy it now.
Yeah. Excellent. So you did that straight away on a mobile phone, you know, without any friction, and arrived the next day. So, like, how easy was that experience? You know?
Super easy.
Yeah. So that's kind of the experience, and that's the consumer experience that, you know, we envisage and that we have in our experience today with Paradox.
Fantastic. So oh, sorry, have you got more in?
Yeah, I was just going to sort of jump through to the next slide, because, you know, for me, it's the power of why. What drives us to be different and think differently, and also how you can then turn that into a competitive advantage. So if you jump into kind of our missions on the next slide, it's really around sort of the paradox in Paradox is that, you know, we believe that people should be spending time with people and not software. So it's really around our, you know, outset was looking at around how we actually make the ATS invisible, and then actually free people up to spend time with people, giving them the gift of time back. So, you know, that's how sort of we view the world of talent acquisition and recruitment.
If anyone's got any questions, feel free to throw them into the Q&A. We'll answer them as we go. So don't sit on it. If you're thinking it, ask it, please.
Absolutely. And, you know, you see lots of, you know, like I suppose time stealers and friction building ATSs today. And, you know, in the chat, I'd love to hear if anyone actually loves, you know, likes into, you know, scheduling interviews. You know, if that could be removed tomorrow and automated, you know, I'd love to hear around, you know, if people's really willing to sort of, you know, hold on and keep hold of it and still continue to do that task. So lastly, I just want to sort of talk through around, you know, what we're doing in terms of automating. And today, really exciting that we actually launched our sort of conversational ATS. So today we can automate about 90% of the hiring experience, you know, and that's all the way from application sort of through to onboarding. And that's via our conversational ATS, or alternatively layer over the likes of, you know, SAP SuccessFactors or Workday, where organizations can, you know, get the same benefits as as having our conversational ATS. So what I might do is sort of pause there and sort of hand over to Keith to share your experience with Fonterra and bring this to life.
Thanks, Ian.
Awesome, thanks Ian. And yeah, look, really happy to be here. Good to see some familiar faces or hear some names in the participants. So I just wanted to, I guess, share some real life experience. So this isn't entirely Ian selling you the dream, and I can explain our experience with it. So just as an introduction, as Trevor said, I'm GM Talent Acquisition for Fonterra. Have been in and around the recruitment game with recruitment tech for way too long. As Trevor said, we crossed paths 20 years ago for the first time. So I'm conscious that we've got a large amount of Australians on here, so I just thought I'd share a little bit about who Fonterra is and then go into the context from a recruitment point of view. So for those who aren't aware of Fonterra, we are a dairy cooperative. We're New Zealand's largest business. I actually sat next to one of my old colleagues from Fletcher Building who claimed it last night, and I said, not a chance. We are responsible for roughly 5% of New Zealand GDP, which is a pretty significant size business. We're owned by 9,000 farmers, and we've got about 20,000 employees. We're responsible for 30% of the world's dairy exports. So it's a pretty massive operation. In Australia, probably the brand of Fonterra not as well known as Mainland Cheese or Perfect Italiano or some of those kind of brands. Anchor in New Zealand is kind of hero brand, I guess.
Okay.
So
we've got one of our participants here, knows Fonterra well, was brought up in Hawera. I'm not sure if I said that. South Taranaki.
Hawera, yeah.
Yeah. How do I say it? Is it Hawera?
Hawera.
Hawera.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Anuska.
Nice to have you along, Anuska.
Sorry, mate.
I actually, I won't share, but I went out on a truck on actually one of the tankers last week, and it's been one of my favourite experiences in my career. It was so fascinating. They're basically mobile computers. They're amazing bit of technology. Okay, let's march on. I just sort of share a little bit about us, our culture, values. Purpose is about creating goodness for generations. We're really into, I was interested in the Aboriginal kind of welcome. We're very much into the Maori view of the world. So they're at the heart of our kind of principles, which are manaakitanga, which is about respect and the strength we have in relationships and people. Kaitiakitanga is about the environment, which is critical for us. We have this concept of being custodians of the land that we want to nurture and pass on for future generations in as good or better shape as we found it. And whānaungatanga, so Kiwis will understand the concept of whānau is really about family, broader than blood. A couple of things just around our strategic direction, I guess, which kind of shape the way we operate. Focus on Aotearoa New Zealand milk. So that's really about how we invest and spend our capital. We've divested some of the farms and things that we had offshore, and we're really kind of focusing on local. Be a leader in sustainability. At the bottom there is really kind of threefold. It's looking at climate, it's looking at water quality, and it's looking at the sustainability of our herds. And then the innovation, be a leader in innovation, is really fundamental, and that's part for us is how do we extract better value out of the product and get into high margin kind of products in the future as well. But that sense of innovation is right through the co-op, so it kind of helps with the conversation when we start talking about changing tech and trying some new things. It made it a lot easier. Okay.
How much of these things, sorry, Liz, can you go back a slide, please? How much of these things have been built into the Paradox experience?
Look, I think the whole concept around respect and valuing people's time and actually making things available to them when they choose to be available is probably at the heart of it. Just the innovation where, I think typically recruitment functions tend to be uninnovative and clunky, and as hard as we all try, that experience can be frustrating for candidates and hiring managers and recruiters alike. So I think just that focus on innovation and continuous improvement is at the heart of Paradox as well. Interesting to hear Ian talk about new launches today.
Thanks, mate.
Just to give you context for us sort of globally, these are New Zealand dollars for the Australians in the audience. So revenues are, that's sort of $23 billion a year. That comes out of 18.5 billion litres of milk that we collect on our farms in New Zealand and Australia. So Australia is an end-to-end business for us. So it's got farms producing milk and taking them through the production to consumers. We've got 48 manufacturing sites globally, 28 in New Zealand, 8 in Australia, all in Victoria and Tasmania, I believe, and we've got 20,000 employees around the world. I like this slide. So we talk about this concept of grass to glass, but it sort of shows the chain, which I think is important in the context of recruitment, because this is it's a pretty significant machine that we operate. And essentially we do the milk collections, we take it through to packaging and processing, and then it's shipped and sold around the globe. Essentially, we've got kind of 3 areas where we make money. So we've got an ingredients business. That's a substantial part of that. So that is largely taking milk and turning it into milk powder and shipping that around the world. We obviously have a consumer business. So those cheese, milk, cream cheeses, and all of those butters that we package and brand, and food services. So typically that is, for example, in McDonald's, whose cheese comes from us, and we deal with people like that. But on any given day, as I said earlier, we ship about $55 million worth of ingredients around the world. So that's pretty significant, and it really means that chain has to be kind of well-oiled, and we have to have people to deliver and do their jobs all along the chain. So that's a pressure on us from a recruitment perspective. So just to give a little bit more context to that, we recruit about 3,500 roles globally. We're in an RPO partnership with Corn Ferry. We're actually stepping away from that in Australia and the rest of the world, but that's remaining in New Zealand. They've done a great job for us. They've been with us since day dot, and so they deserve some credit for the decisions that have been made in here as well. We've got high seasonality, so cows produce more milk when the grass is greener. So September and November we have peak, and that peak, about 33%, about a third of our roles are volume roles. We get about 50,000 applications per year. But I think when we think about the Paradox story, that volume is part of the decision making in terms of how do we secure talent, how do we make sure that we've got access to the best people quickly. The tanker drivers are a great example of that, I think. So, we'll recruit up to 500 tanker drivers. They'll be on the roads every day. And if they're not on the roads and we're not picking the milk up, we create problems right through that supply chain. As a group of people, that is, they're really in demand. We didn't have a problem attracting them for years, but everyone's caught up to us and is trying to make it more competitive and throw dollars at these guys. So they're very much in high demand. They are a mobile first group of people, so they don't sit on a laptop, they're hard to connect with, and they want something that is really easy and is mobile and text kind of led. So that's that type of group, and the importance of them is really why we kind of decided we really needed to up our game. We were using, I think we shifted from Taleo into SuccessFactors for people, and participants, they'll be using those and they'll know the pain of those systems and how clunky they are. We shifted to Avature as an ATX, and we overlaid Paradox at the same time. So
can we just check in and see whether anyone's got any questions on any of this tech and see what they thought? And question from me to you is that, are blue collar people, the target of Paradox as far as Fonterra goes, or are you looking at other types of employees as well?
Yeah. Look, so when we launched it, I think part of the problem we wanted to address was how do we secure that blue collar workforce who are more difficult and non-traditional in terms of how you engage with them from a technology point of view. So that certainly was a driver. I think the reality is we didn't want candidates to have a different experience. So if you go on, you can go through on a normal kind of workflow through through the laptop, or you can choose to engage and apply via chat. So we wanted everyone to have that experience, but we were conscious that there were groups that actually only really operate on mobile, and that was, I think, a pretty significant driver for us. We've launched it externally on all roles. We haven't launched it internally at the same time, but we're about to do that. So everyone will have the same experience, and I think the Paradox experience is a superior experience. We get better feedback and results through our NPS sort of surveys from external candidates than we do from internal candidates, and that won't purely be about the technology, but certainly I think that will be a contributor. I did see a question pop up and disappear, and that was what tech we were using. So we for years had Taleo and then went to SuccessFactors being the HR IS system. So we attempted to make that work.
Keith, there's another one there from Craig. Thanks, Craig. Really appreciate the question. If you can throw them into the Q&A, it makes it a bit easier for us because we're trying to keep tabs on both, and it's not easy. But there's a question here: how exhaustive was the process in narrowing down your final tech solution, Keith?
Look, I wasn't here for it, and it really came through with our relationship with Korn Ferry, and Korn Ferry obviously will be party to a whole bunch with their global database around the world. So I don't know is the answer. I introduced Avature when I was at Fletcher Building as well, and I'm a big fan of that. In terms of the Paradox relationship, that's a global relationship, so that was very much introduced to us through our Korn Ferry partnership.
And we've got a comment by Jonathan Banks. Thanks, Jonathan, appreciate that. Bus drivers, my new audience, same challenges as tanker drivers. Keith, can you envisage that the two are almost identical?
Oh, look, very much. I think if you want a well-paid career in New Zealand, think about going and getting your class class 4s and class 5s. So we only accept class 5s, but it's the same. It's absolutely the same challenge as, how do we get to them? How do we make it easy to them for an audience that, doesn't sit and behave in the way that a professional office-based kind of audience does.
So Keith, when you went out on the road the other day in the tanker, were you going for your class 4 or class 5?
I think I'll stick to my class 1 to be honest. But yeah, I did get to have a play. It's amazing. It's amazing tech. Part of the differentiator or the competitive edge for Fonterra is that literally, if anything goes wrong in the supply chain, because we, lab technicians and things like that are constantly testing product to make sure that it's, hasn't got any bugs in it, etc. But if it does, we can trace back to which farm, which vat, on which day it came from. It's pretty phenomenal. Okay, just conscious I'm hogging this. Shall we click forward? I think I might have touched on this really when we talked about our drivers for change. I think, as Ian said earlier, the number one is kind of in the middle there. It's about experience. Yeah, it's about making it easy, meeting the consumer demand, and I guess if you think about that experience, you're thinking about it from all sides. Hiring managers and recruiters. Recruiters want to focus on the things that add value and bring joy to their lives, and dealing with grumpy candidates isn't one of them. We certainly wanted to position ourselves from a brand perspective as innovative, as leading. I don't think we had been there, so that was great. And as I say, it's part of the culture here and was very much supported. And obviously there is an efficiency piece that comes out of it. And if you think about efficiency in terms of just pure time, and that's involved in it, but the speed of how this kind of operates and the fact that someone is doing your talking for you is super efficient. And if you think about the business case, which historically, and everyone will appreciate, finance and people up the line want to see, well, what are the dollars if we're spending, what are we getting back, what's the return? We believe we saved on roughly 2 heads that we could repurpose or remove, and that was just as we launched Mary, which is our chap, into the front end, which is the Q&A, the capturing applications and the screening. We haven't gone yet through into the scheduling piece, so that's in train. And I think from my recruiter's perspective, that's the game changer for them as well. The back and forth of just trying to interview, trying to organize interviews and times and things like that, and to be able to automate that will be an absolute kind of game changer. So this is Mary. Mary is a female Maori name, and we definitely wanted to kind of represent that. She is a person rather than an avatar. We felt that was important. We wanted the paradox of a human contact when you're talking to a conversational AI, as I think Ian probably spoke to. And we, I guess for us, this is reasonably new, and we wanted the experience to see at any stage in the process, people can say, I want to talk to someone. So they can then jump out and it'll come through into an inbox, and they'll get a phone call. Less than 1%, far less than 1% of people actually do that. Most people are really happy with the experience. So, that's been a really good learning for us, because it's a kind of, you hold your breath moment when you do these things. So that's Mary. What else can I say? I think that's probably enough on that one. And I just to kind of look at some of the stats that we've got out of the Paradox partnership. This is 8 months of data. In that 8 months, we've had 17,000 candidates come through Paradox. Roughly, if you consider our volumes in that period of time, that's about 50% of our candidates are coming through and choosing, to have a conversational chat and application through Paradox versus going the traditional career site application process.
Keith?
Yes.
There's a question here, and online virtual assistants, thanks very much, Rebecca, by the way, have a tendency to be female, which doesn't really support gender equality or gender equity. Did you consider a male virtual assistant?
I wasn't here when the decision was made to comment on that. Ian, I don't know if you were part of that.
No, I wasn't, but maybe I'll speak more broadly. I think, organizations, it's a really, important decision around what you name your avatar, the image, and each organization takes a kind of slightly different approach or lens. For us, it's really important that it represents your brand and your tone of voice. For example, your sort of Unilever has gone with, I suppose, much more of an image rather than having kind of an identity attached to it. And, for example, UOB Bank in Singapore, it has sort of Jonas because it sounded like join us. So each organization has a slightly different, approach. So we see a real sort of blend of different avatars, but it's an interesting question, Rebecca, that you pose.
Yeah. And I guess you can jump out and change it. For us, female representation isn't where we want it, and male representation is even poorer. So I imagine they were part of the decision down that track.
So Keith, there's no truth to the rumour you're going to change Mary's name to Keith?
No, and I definitely wouldn't use a photo of me. I don't think. I think that'll scare the children off. So no, I think Maddie is here for a while to come.
We've got another question here that I thought I saw. What parts of the recruitment process have been automated? I think I saw that. Or did I just make that up?
No, I think that popped up. Look, as far as Paradox goes, I guess what it's doing, and if you look at this statistic, there's 24,800 hours of talk time in there. So that process has been moved from people trying to chase and get hold of recruiters through the process into a conversational chat. Generally speaking, we're using it around Q&A through the process, capturing applications and screening of that. That will flow into scheduling. There is assessment stuff automated in that process, so that will go through. We've got some quite high requirements around, you can imagine drug and alcohol and things like that through processes with drivers and so on. So all of that's kind of built into it. When we get scheduling down, it could turn into a reasonably light touch on some of those volume roles because they are very kind of prescriptive about the sort of skills you need to bring.
Just before you go on, Leanne Higgins has got a great question. I'll direct this to you, please, Ian. Do you see an increase with people going through conversational AI rather than the application route as people start to become familiar with the product?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think there's so many different angles that you can look at this, and we've sort of talked a lot around that kind of conversational experience through a career site. Equally, it's a text-based solution. So whether that's sort of scanning a QR code or doing a short code in New Zealand off the back of a truck, for instance, that's a lot of our clients do that in the US. It's having that same application experience via SMS, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger. So, I think it's actually, enabling candidates to apply sort of anywhere, anytime through those different channels. In terms of the conversion rates, for example, on screen at Fonterra, we see a 90% application completion rate from clicking on apply through Olivia, assisting with that career search and completing an application. So, that's a lot higher than industry standards, through other channels. So I think people are getting very familiar with it very quickly.
And we've got a wonderful question here from Liz Duncan. Liz, thank you. Keen to understand the relationship between the ATS and the virtual assistant. Where does friction enter the equation? E.g., data structures require first name, surname, email, la da da da. So Ian, can you have a bash at answering that one too, please?
Yeah, good. That's great. Another great question. I feel put on the spot. So I suppose there's two pieces to that. So in some scenarios, and I haven't sort of shared much about our McDonald's use case, but with McDonald's, it's essentially McHire is the solution, and that's an end-to-end solution. So it's, you know, essentially Paradox is the conversational ATS from application all the way through to onboarding. So in terms of that data, it's absolutely sort of seamless, and sort of, you know, recruiters or hiring managers sort of transacting, you know, sort of through that experience, again, all mobile enabled. If it's, for instance, the same scenario here with Fonterra, we're kind of layering over. So the engagement and communication layer over the top and integrating with success factors, Aperture in this scenario, Workday, for example, and through sort of deep integrations, all the data sort of, you know, goes through sort of seamlessly. So, you know, for example, if I think there's one quite technical question there from Liz, but so what we can do is actually pull up, for example, on the basic contact details, just like your ATS does around matching for duplicate profiles, and through the API recognizing that and using two-factor identification to actually recognize if they're a returning candidate. So that's how we kind of use two-factor verification to overcome the need for logins. You know, those sort of, you know, usernames and passwords that, you know, people just forget nowadays because they've just got too many.
Keep those questions and comments rolling in, folks. Well done. Keith, how much have you got to go?
I've got another 2 comments. So, and one more slide. So I think I did want to talk about that thank yous message, because I think it's interesting, and to the kind of previous question about people getting used to this and so on and so forth. People engaging with, you know, Siri and Alexa and all those sort of conversational pieces. So they you know, they're becoming part of our lives. But roughly a third of people will say thank you to Mitty at the end of their conversations, which, you know, is such a nice human kind of touch to something with a virtual assistant. And then the last slide I had was just, you know, looking at, because I think this is really powerful when the engagements are happening. So, you know, I think, again, consumer-led, you know, being able to service people when they are choosing to engage with you is super important. About half of all our engagements are coming sort of outside of normal business hours, when speaking to someone would otherwise not be possible. But I think, you know, when we've got roles like tanker drivers or bus drivers or someone in competitive markets with multiple people recruiting at the same time, you know, I think candidates you need to get them off the market into your process as quickly as possible. So having them be able to get online, chat, answer the questions, apply through a process, you know, and I think it happens. I think our average is around the 10 minutes worth of conversations before we get an application, but, you know, that can be 2 or 3 minutes at the short end. So I think that's really important.
Okay, we've got a question here on lessons learned from Alyssa Patoulis. We are looking at implementing Paradox. There you go, Ian, there's a lead. Keith, on reflection, what would you have done differently? More of, less of?
I think we probably would have gone harder quicker. You know, I think there's some natural things with introducing new tech when it's still considered to be, you know, reasonably new in industry. We didn't know a lot of people using a product as good as Paradox in the market. So there was definitely a nervousness from us. We didn't push the internal audience, which I think is a regret. We should have laid it over our internal application process as well. I don't know that, you know, to stand it up would have, with scheduling, just would have taken too long. But I think, you know, I think we definitely would have done that if we could have done it all at the same time. I think that would have made it a lot better. But yeah,
Alyssa, great to have you on the call as well. I have a great affinity and close affinity with Optus, and look forward to Olivia going live across the Singtel group. And I think to sort of touch on that, one of the trends that we're seeing globally around, especially around the drive for efficiency with organisations at the moment, especially in the US, and I see that sort of transcending into the Australian market as well, is that what we're seeing is this shift to drive scheduling first. So automated interview scheduling, driving a quicker, delivery on ROI, whether it's, automating, recruiter phone screens, for instance, and then more complex scheduling as well. So we're seeing that shift in the US, that it's really around getting, the biggest bang for your buck straight away, and then sort of starting to deliver some of the other pieces around that experience, at a second stage.
So Ian, can we talk about ROI? Because I think it's important. At the end of the day, everyone's got sponsors that they need to satisfy when they're implementing innovation. And we've talked a lot about the candidate experience, but candidate experience may not necessarily be alone to get it over the line.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think we've deliberated on this before, and there's kind of it's also a hard question because there's so many different ways that you can take this. If you're looking and presenting to finance, procurement, they're looking for cost savings, efficiency savings, and so I look sort of to a case study with General Motors where from an operational perspective, we reduced their sort of time to schedule interviews from 5 days to 29 minutes. But essentially what we did, we actually managed to gain about $2 million in cost savings over the first 9 months. And that was by repurposing over 50 TA coordinators that were doing that task. So they're able to repurpose them to tasks that add high value. But I think in terms of if you're an organization that's a consumer brand, if it's hospitality, sort of retail, there's a much closer line and correlation between, your candidate experience, and your consumer brand as well, and also understaffed, restaurants or retail. Again, there's a real dollar impact for your organization if you've got understaffed, restaurants or stores, for instance. So, dialing up speed to hire, and then also delivering those consumer grade experiences is a much greater sort of, a clearer line to draw on an ROI and benefit. So look, Trevor, Keith, really keen to hear your thoughts on business casing as well. And certainly that consumer brands versus, B2B brands as well.
Well, look, it's an interesting one. And, Keith, we discussed this in relation to Air New Zealand and things like that, that if you get a disappointed candidate, and I think, look, I've been canned for saying this, but I think it's more important in terms of a B2C than it is for a B2B, right? Because if I can make a choice whether I'm going to do Optus or whether I'm going to do Telstra based on having a shitty experience as a candidate, it does rub off. It does impact. Always Optus. Well, there you go. Thank you. But the situation that I see it is that you've got to justify it to the bean counters. How did McDonald's do it? I mean that's a significant thing. And is it only sort of the corporates? I understand with McDonald's, you've got a franchise component and a corporate component in the stores. I don't go to McDonald's very much, but I do know that some friends of ours own a franchise. How does it operate there, man?
Yeah, it's sort of twofold. It is corporate and a combination of franchisee. So it's maybe sort of taking that a step back. Kind of they sort of did some analysis around what's actually understanding the business impact of understaffed restaurants. So they could draw that direct correlation between sort of understaffed restaurants, was about $500 per day per restaurant if they had sort of, understaffing. And that rolled up across all of their understaffed restaurants globally to about $2 billion. So they saw that as a $2 billion, problem. And it was this vicious cycle they saw in their restaurants that if you have understaffed restaurants, that puts more pressure on the existing team members. They're probably doing shifts they don't want to do. They're dealing with angry customers. That then leads to greater turnover, and in the worst case, potentially even having to shut doors or, not deliver customer service. So, in terms of their sort of drive, and their problem was around speed wins. So reducing time to recruit from 14 days with their existing ATS, to Paradox, which is less than 4 days. By automating, returning time back into the hiring manager day. So in restaurants, it's hiring manager led. And that's about 5 to 8 hours a week as well, returning back into their time to spend it on high value added tasks than admin. But so the solution globally now is live across the UK, Ireland, Canada, the US, over 20,000 restaurants. And to your point, Trevor, that's kind of really hard to resonate with that when you sort of start talking about $2 billion, 20,000 restaurants. But to your point, you know, that is a largely franchised model. They've got, you know, restaurant owners that, you know, 1 or 2 restaurants. So the solution has to be scalable. And with McDonald's, it's, you know, an opt-in model. So we were able to prove that, you know, those return on investment, you know, that's, you know, equally scalable for those franchisees, that's 1 or 2 restaurants versus large corporate chains, is equally valuable. So, you know, within McDonald's, they've received about a 60% take up across their franchise network, which is absolutely huge.
It's interesting. I mean, I'm sure you've all experienced signs in hospitality, certainly here in Lygon Street. I live very close, where, you know, staff wanted. And I've also seen signs where, look, you know, please don't get impatient with us from a hospitality perspective. We simply don't have the staff that are required. So do you have hospitality clients as well, Ian? I mean, in terms of Paradox?
Yeah, so like, I suppose in terms of,
I mean, I'm not talking the big gorillas like McDonald's, and excuse me for saying that, but
yeah,
sort of
like,
smaller ones.
Like even Wendy's, for instance, in New Zealand, use Paradox. You know, their CEO sort of wrote an article that's really, again, around in the competitive market. It was actually just off the back of COVID, around actually trying to, you know, again, speed wins to get to that talent first. So even in sort of the smaller New Zealand market, you know, they're starting to see some big impacts in terms of, you know, having a solution that's conversation, text-based, and, you know, automating the process to deliver faster hiring. And there's some conversations in the chat as well. I don't know if you sort of want.
Have I missed them? Have I? Where are they? Can you point them?
There's a couple of open questions in there as well that we should maybe try to get to.
Well, please read them out. I'm sorry, I do apologise.
There's a great one from Matt. So, you know, are you using Mary to screen out candidates as a and are you seeing an impact on sort of candidate quality? Or is it sort of just delivering, you know, Fonterra more candidates?
Yeah, that's a great question. And g'day, Matt. I think there's a couple of things in there. So one, it's delivering those more candidates because the process is easier for people to get through. They're not getting frustrated and leaving. So you saw some of the stats. So that's definitely in play. It's an interesting. So yes, we are using it to screen candidates. It's an interesting one though, because I think what we're seeing in this candidate tight market is that a lot of ATSs have been built around automating the screening out processes. And I think what we started to feel was actually we were missing out on candidates who were capable of doing the roles because of the way the workflows had been kind of designed. So we've really gone back to challenging ourselves around those things. So we're kind of looking at it 2 ways in terms of quality and transferable skills and all those kind of things. So.
You know, I've got another question. I've been, you know, sort of has come up as people have been speaking and come to me, which is essentially what's the difference between, you know, the whole notion of ChatGPT, which I've just joined, well, I've been using now for about 6 months, but I just paid the subscription, and recruitment automation. Where do you see the nexus?
Yeah, it's a great question and really sort of topical. And I think one, like Paradox has been sort of, you know, talking about sort of a conversational first approach, you know, that's sort of text-based or sort of chat-driven for many years, and how we can apply that to recruiting. Sort of ChatGPT has kind of always sort of come out and really sort of, you know, been really sort of resonated with everyone. And, you know, for example, you know, whether that's sort of using it for, you know, write articles or even job adverts. So it's really powerful. I think some of the differences, and I don't profess to be an expert on ChatGPT, so if anyone on the webinar would love to add to this, please jump in. But, you know, essentially ChatGPT uses I suppose responses from a broader, you know, across the web, whereas, you know, Paradox is much more recruitment focused, and it's trained on sort of responses sort of within the framework that we provide. So it's leveraging sort of natural language processing to kind of make a conversation much softer. So I'm not sure if anyone in the past has used old school chatbots where, you know, it's really kind of, you know, frictionless. It's like playing a game of ping pong where you have to be really precise with your responses. By leveraging sort of NLP, it just allows for a much softer experience. So if you're interacting with Miri, you can, you know, ask questions, you can, you know, even make spelling mistakes, you can say yes, yeah. So it's really around picks up that sentiment and allows for a much softer experience. So I think, again, ChatGPT, conversational sort of UI is really powerful. For us, though, it goes back to our mission statement that we believe that hiring decisions is about humans making those decisions, and they should never replace humans making those hiring decisions. It's really around how we use automation to automate and remove those transactional tasks from the hiring process. So whether that's screening for basic minimum criteria, writing job ads, automating interview scheduling. It's about freeing the recruiter's time to move to kind of more of a talent advisory model, Trevor, that I know that you speak of.
Thank you. Sorry, that was my fault. I wasn't scrolling up on the questions, so how dumb am I? I think you'll have to fire me, Ian, from the next facilitation.
Trevor.
Michelle Magnus has asked a great question and a contentious one, Keith. I mean, has implementing Paradox been one of the main drivers to reduce Fonterra's use of Korn Ferry, as in less headcount needed? There you go, mate. You're on the spot.
There you go. Well, the answer is no, and I think we go back to the conversation that Korn Ferry absolutely introduced us, and that started the relationship. So we'll say thanks for that. No, it hasn't been about that. I guess the conversation with Korn Ferry was more around how do we bring automation. This can't be just about more heads every time we've got peak season. We need to bring another 20 recruiters in. There's got to be things out there. So it was more the challenge to them about automation and innovation and how we use technology and not sort of layer in more heads. But that certainly hasn't been part of the decision to kind of move away from them outside of New Zealand. That was a bit more strategic, and there was aspects to that business and some restructuring of our own business that sort of made that make sense to us.
No, and fair enough too. I mean, it's in keeping with your values. There's another question here about from Matt Bartlett. Oh, we answered that one. I saw a question about can you integrate with any ATS then?
Yes, we can do with nearly all of them.
So
today that we have with
list the ones that you've integrated with, if you can remember them.
The main ones that we work with day to day is SuccessFactors, Workday, could be Cornerstone, UKG, but there's too many to remember off the top of my head. But all the main ones that we do integrate. We've got, for example, really close relationships and partnerships, with, the likes of SuccessFactors and Workday as well as obviously with Korn Ferry as well, and sort of their innovative solution, Nimble.
Well, guys, we've got 5 minutes left if we choose to use it. Just back to the audience. Are there any other questions or comments? We've been speaking now for, nearly 50 minutes. Any thoughts? We'd love to hear from you. I mean, we try and make these webinars about you, and indeed, there's got to be a huge correlation between Paradox, which is a human experience, and a webinar, which is also a human experience. We'd love to hear any thoughts you may have or questions before we close. I'm not seeing a lot of activity here, guys. I must remember to try. Oh, Kelly's thanked us. I think we might close on it unless Ian, Keith, have you got any final comments that you want to make? Well, we give people back 5 minutes of their day.
No, I've spoken enough. Give people time.
Keith, we always love hearing your voice and your thought leadership. But so just on behalf of sort of Paradox and the team, really want to thank Keith for joining us today, and everyone joining the call, and also to Trevor and the ATC team for running these amazing events. So thank you, everyone, and hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Keith, and thanks everyone for joining us. We've had a ball and really appreciated your input. All the best.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
See you.